Hi, this is Ed Fortunato, and I'm giving the presentation for Board 6, Scenario 3, the cross-country flight, where you decide that, or you realize that there is a time change between two of the checkpoints, and you need to figure out how you're going to respond to that. So presumably you've done your pre-flight planning, you've got your maps out, you use your electronic flight bag, if that's what you're going to use for a flight or something like that, and you've done a thorough reconnaissance of the flight route that you're going to take, and you're familiar with the terrain. You've got identifiable checkpoints, and you plug them into your program, and you go fly. So as you're flying, you realize that there's a significant time change between two of the checkpoints. And the way that you can respond to this is kind of utilizing the acronym DECIDE: detect, estimate, choose, ID, do, and evaluate. And that's just a model. There's other models that you can use as well, but that's a discipline model that we use and teach in flight school to formulate a course of action and how to respond to something that's unplanned for. So the first thing you do is you detect the fact that a change has occurred, and then you got to figure out how you're going to respond to it. And the first thing is maybe use a couple different data points. Make sure there really is a time change and you didn't just misread something, misread the clock. If you've got a GPS, look at the GPS. If you've done your flight planning, corroborate the two and see truly is there a time change. And then is it significant or not? So estimate would be the next thing. Estimate the need to react to the change. Is it a big deal or is it not a big deal? Did you file a flight plan and you're outside the boundaries that that the FAA would be, or the the flight service would be looking for you if you didn't show up on time? You needed to report it. Are you going to run out of fuel? What exactly is the issue if it's going to take you longer to fly between the two checkpoints? Is it a concern? Is it an emergency? Is it an inconvenience? Because that will determine exactly the next courses, the next options that you have. So that's detect, estimate. C would be choose a desirable outcome. So again, if it's so far off, and presume it was either you made a mistake in your calculations, or maybe it's wind, or whatever the reason is. If fuel's an issue, then come up with your fuel plan. Maybe you need to deviate, go to a different airfield, get some fuel. Or just keep flying. Again, like I said, what's the consequences of it taking you longer to get between two checkpoints? Unless it's something dire, it's probably just an inconvenience that you're going to be sitting in the airplane logging more flight time, getting between the two. But choose a desired outcome that you want, and then figure out what you need to do. I presume if it was some sort of mission where somebody was waiting on you, maybe there'd be a need to notify them and let them know that you're not going to be on time, and you might need to make some alternate plans. But choose a desired outcome, which is basically land safely. Look at the courses of actions. Are there any hazards that you need to mitigate? Is it just an inconvenience, or is this thing turning into something that could get worse and worse? Because if you've got hazards that you've identified, then the next thing you need to do is figure out how to mitigate the risk. D would be do, take action. So do something. Fly faster, maybe that's an option. If you've got enough horsepower, you can do that, make up the time. And then E, evaluate the outcome. So like I said, just because it's going to take you longer between two checkpoints, you got to look at how does that impact the bigger issue of the flight? What's the outcome that you want? And maybe the outcome is good, and that's fine. And if it's not the outcome you want, think of a different course of action, implement that. See how you respond to that, and then proceed. So that's the bottom line. You've got a cross-country flight. You've got a time change between two checkpoints. Biggest thing is figuring out, is it an issue or not? Just because it's not something that you plan for doesn't mean it's an emergency, doesn't mean it's significant. If it is, then you need to figure out what's the right course of action, go through the DECIDE acronym, and at the end of the day, fly the airplane, land safely. So thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.